I served the Roman Empire. I fought wars against those who did not believe in our gods. But nothing could prepare me for the truth that is now risen.
He was very special.
They're fanatics.
What was his name? He was called Yeshua.
The man's dead. His followers are in hiding.
He's been a threat.
Take control out there and finish things.
The tomb is sealed, guarded with your life. If this body vanishes,
We have a potential messiah.
Where has he gone? You tell me.
You will track down the corpse of Yeshua.
what happened to the Nazarene?
He's right here. Open your heart and see.
I don't know what to believe anymore.
Joseph, thank you so much for being here.
Nice to be here. I've just got a problem with security. They took my gladius away.
Ah,
Yeah.
and they dressed us alike, which is odd.
Yeah, this is great, isn't it?
Joseph, so Risen, I had the chance to see this movie last week. It's fantastic. You're great in it. And you play Clavius, and in many ways, it's a story of belief for your character, whether or not he can believe. Do you want to talk about sort of creating this character and that arc for him?
Yeah, it's a big arc and a really a juicy role for an actor, irresistible to go on such a journey. It's a story that millions know well, and but the unique takeaway is seeing it through the eyes of a non-believer. So seeing this story unfold, and when I read it initially, it felt more like a film noir, like a man sucked into a sort of a murder mystery. But it becomes one of the greatest murder mysteries of all time.
In many ways, it's almost like a PR scandal for the Roman Empire. It's sort of situated that way as well. It becomes almost like a ace in the hole Billy Wilder kind of thing,
Yes,
where he's
yes.
sort of out there trying to prove that this thing exists so that the rest of the world doesn't freak out and there isn't a scandal.
Well, they're trying to. It's also the sort of ugly bosses syndrome where you've got the Emperor Tiberius arriving, breathing down the neck of Pontius Pilate breathing down the neck of Clavius, to sort this mess out, because there were uprisings all the time. There were insurrections all the time in Judea. In fact, for a Roman, it would be the last place you wanted to be posted on earth because it was just so brutal. And in this case, he's charged to find the body of Christ because they know it's a hoax, and the followers will dig up the body or take the body from the tomb and proclaim him risen, and thus start another revolt.
I feel like since Shakespeare in Love and since Elizabeth, you are cast quite regularly in period pieces. Where do you think that comes from?
Well, it's weird, but the films that seem to work are the period films, and the ones I do contemporary.
Of course, yeah,
I do wear jeans.
I saw Strangerland just last
Right,
year. I was telling you
yeah.
about it. I saw it at Sundance. Fantastic
Great,
film
thank
with
you.
you and Nicole Kidman and
Yeah.
Hugo Weaving. But you do a lot
Yeah,
of period films
I do.
as well.
Well, it's a fair question. I tend to look at roles not based on where they're positioned in history, but how those characters are positioned. And I'm sort of drawn more to the human condition than I am where it's set. And I often feel like Shakespeare in Love or even the story of Christ, whether you believe it or not, these are the very resonant and arresting themes. And they're arresting because they're modern in many senses, that we're all searching in some way. We're all trying to move forward in our sort of evolutionary process. And this might help that, whether it's contemplation of faith or if it's in Shakespeare in terms of love and writing. So I look at them less as period costume dramas, but more like modern takes on the human condition.
Now, when it comes to doing something like Risen, your character isn't necessarily a man of faith going into the story, but he becomes one. Are you a man of faith yourself? And going into a movie like this, do you feel like you have to be a person of faith?
My faith comes in and out of focus all the time, and I won't bore the socks off you about my position on that. But I certainly, in doing this film, I felt more connected to having that conversation with myself, what faith means to me. Clavius is a non-believer. He's spiritual in that he, like Romans, they prayed to a series of gods, and his chosen god would have been, we felt, Mars, the god of war. And I love the fact that he even tries to persuade Yeshua's God, Yahweh, to come over. So he prays for him to cross over and support him. So he's spiritual in that sense, but he's not a believer in terms of Christ and the followers.
Now, when I was watching, I myself am not a believer, but when I was watching the movie, as you said, I feel like when you're making it, it is something that if you are a non-believer of any kind, you have to start reckoning with maybe why and how do I actually feel about this story. So when you're going into shooting it, do you think more of the detective element that you're talking about in order to sort of get your character through this and get your mind through it, or do you start thinking about your own personal grapplings while
My approach to this was to build up his military conditioning, so that he could go on a series of routes and avenues in terms of the investigation and be deconditioned by being confronted with his conditioning. So I was more interested in sort of a man of war. So I went off to Rome to enroll in gladiator school.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did. There's a series, these wonderful guys that go on tour around Europe, and they reenact sort of gladiatorial fights. But in the day, the gladiators, as you know, were rock stars in their day, and the Roman army really lent on them to give them tips on how to fight. So they were influenced by the gladiators. So I Googled this. It was also a great way to have a quick week holiday in Rome. I Googled this.
Gotta go, it's research, gotta go.
Producers, this is really important. So I went out there, and they're actually not just gladiators. They call themselves physical archaeologists. So these guys, they go and amass all the information on Roman military warfare through murals, frescoes, sculptures, and they get these pieces of evidences, these depictions, and they reenact them. So at the front of the movie, there's a battle sequence where you see the testudo being the form of the turtle. So the guys would clad themselves in their shields and they would move in this uniform formation to go to the front line. What these guys gave us is the idea that testudo could hit a wall and then go up, and it could serve as a ladder so you could get up to people that were higher than you. And that came out of all this kind of research, and that's the first time we've seen it in film. But I really wanted to get into the mindset of what it was to be a Roman military tribune, and I felt that the way they fought was the way they thought. It was surgical, brutal, it was economical, and that they were a machine. And
so for a sort of machine like that to become any kind of service to the faith is almost impossible, because you said you've conditioned yourself to be almost robotic at that point, to be machine-like.
Well, that was the challenge. Then I wanted his conditioning, the way that he thought and acted, to be unraveled and challenged, that even with all his conditioning, he found that his subjects that he was interrogating were impenetrable. They held some secret that he couldn't unlock. But of course, the real irrevocable change, if you like, is when he goes to arrest the disciples in an upper room, and there's a man in that room that shouldn't be there.
Can we say what man that...
Well, yeah, you can, because this story's pretty well known.
No, there's a spoiler on...
Big spoiler alert. Don't read the Bible.
Jesus is, right? You guys know Jesus? Your supporting cast in this film, Tom Felton, is really fantastic. Cliff Curtis, can you talk about working with them a little bit?
Yeah, love Tom. Wicked sense of humor, brilliant actor. We just gelled immediately. And he goes on a lovely arc. His character is very ambitious and looks up to Clavius in a way and has huge respect. And his conditioning in terms of that is undone when he realizes his mentor might have joined the enemy, if you like. That is a spoiler. And then there's Cliff Curtis, our wonderful Yeshua, who's beautiful, present, and spiritual, and has a wonderful way of working as an actor. And it's a dream cast.
Now, we've seen in the last few years that there is an audience for faith-based movies, and I've seen some of those movies. I would say that this is probably the most well-made, most sort of, I would say, studio budgeted. This is a Sony film, so never have we seen a sort of faith-based film made at this level. Would you say that this is a faith-based film?
It's interesting. I think this demands a diverse audience. You could be agnostic, non-believer, or a believer and still take value from it. I think that the game changer is that it's true to Scripture, as best as you can be true to Scripture, in terms of interpreting that through film, i.e. as soon as you put a lens on or camera angle, you're by virtue of doing that, you're translating and adapting, even if you want to remain true to the Word. But I know that our producers and writers work diligently with the faith communities in order to adhere respectfully to Scripture. But at the same time, you've got a wonderful director like Kevin Reynolds, who's a veteran a man of cinema, and he's going to make it cinematic and appeal to the cinephile. So you're going to get that balance. And what I love here is its high production value. It's not preachy. It's not Sunday school. It's not conservative. And again, it's not the opposite side, which is revisionist and goes right off the text, if you like.
I think sometimes what people forget is that you can embrace and enjoy a biblical story without necessarily being a person of faith. The biblical stories have lived on because they're actual incredible stories, not necessarily because of the belief that you have inside you as to whether or not they are real or actual happenings.
Completely agree. I think that's such an important point to realize that the rich value in life lessons. And if you're not a believer, I think you could come to this movie and at least take away the power of redemption, the power of forgiveness. You don't have to be particularly religious to understand how the quality of that and the quality of a second chance. Clavius gets a second chance. He's forgiven by the man that he helped put to death. And so you could take that virtually, or you could use that as a metaphor.
Where did you guys shoot the movie?
We shot in Malta and in southern Spain. So a lot of the sequences, the Roman sequences, are in Malta and the Sea of Galilee. When we get out and Clavius goes with the disciples to find more about this strange happening, we're into the deserts of southern Spain, and I think the deserts where Clint Eastwood shot his spaghetti westerns with Sergio Leone.
Wow, when you get offered a part like this, is one of your first questions, where are we shooting this?
When am I going to Rome? Yeah. Yes. That's part of the perks. But it was pretty brutal. And I think, like you said, the locations, I feel, lend an authenticity to the place, to the film. But we were at the height of summer at these locations, and it was pretty brutal.
I have to ask you about something that you've been involved in, or that you were involved in a few years ago. I think it's my favorite season of the show, and that's American Horror Story season 2. Asylum. Yeah, it was the season that got me involved in the show, that got me engaged with it. I hadn't seen any of it before that. Can you talk about getting the part on the show and working with Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk and that team?
Yeah, Brad and Ryan Murphy, two amazing, important, powerful voices in TV. And I got into television really by virtue of working with Ryan Murphy on a film called Running with Scissors. And then he wrote this brilliant pilot, which might have been a little bit too risky for its day, which dealt with transgender. And
really,
yes,
an unproduced pilot?
An unproduced pilot. It didn't get picked up because.
Were you going to be a part of it?
I was. Yeah, I was in it. We shot it. We did it. It was called Pretty Handsome, and it was a story of a man going through a gender change, and how that impacted his family. It was brilliant.
Were you the man going through transition?
I was. Yeah.
Oh, this is incredible.
Yeah.
When was this?
This was straight after Running with Scissors, so you have to forgive me. I don't know the date.
It's like
but
2006, 2007.
Something like that. So it was a little bit too brave even then for its time. But I was working with Ryan, who I think is this extraordinary, free-reigning, creative voice that is not suffocated by fear of the unknown, that he strives forward, and he's revolutionary. So when he asked me to come into American Horror, I jumped at it because I knew what I was going to get into.
What is the set of, specifically Asylum, the set there must have been insane.
Creepy.
What did it look like?
Really creepy. I mean, it's the sort of place that when you're alone, you get the heebie-jeebies. It's even though you're on a lot in Paramount, you feel like you're in this weird place in Massachusetts or somewhere. The main character, if you like, of Asylum was the set design, as much as anything.
And I have to say, when you go back and watch some of those episodes of American Horror Story, the ones directed by Ryan and one of their other regular directors who, I'm forgetting his name, he went on to direct Me and Earl and The Dying Girl.
Oh yeah, Alfonso.
Incredibly cinematic storytelling in these episodes. When you jumped on the show for American Horror Story and you're seeing what they're doing with their cameras and everything, were you like, I can't believe this is television?
Well, the director Alfonso you mentioned, is just a stunning film. Me, Earl and the Dying Girl, brilliant, poignant, beautiful, heart-wrenching movie. But an original voice of cinema, and you could see then he did a few episodes with me, and you could see then his choice of camera work was cinematic, original, daring, breaking boundaries, and you have to sort of applaud Ryan for allowing someone to constantly change the game and shake it up and not get beholden into that awful kind of televisual over-the-shoulder reverse syndrome.
He's someone that when an episode, there would be episodes where they would start and I would find, I have to find out who directed this. Like, I have to find out who designed that shot that went from back here, up, down, and upside down and came around. And how did they let him do that?
You know, I think just that his talent won out, and it's audacious, but at the same time, I think that's what Ryan and the team are all about, pushing those boundaries.
And you got to work with one thing that show also does is it somehow casts the most amazing actors and actresses around you, and you had like Jessica Lange in there with you.
Amazing.
What's it like working with Jessica Lange?
She blew me away. What's
it like being next to Jessica Lange? Like,
it's phenomenal. But she is extraordinary, and just her energy, her commitment, she's just the real deal, and was beautiful and humble and enchanting and wildly talented and pretty sexy.
Absolutely. I think we have some time for some audience questions. Does anyone have any questions in the audience?
Hi, thanks for being
Hello.
here. So while filming this movie, what was the most craziest scene that you filmed that you'll always remember?
A lot of crazy days, but the one that I remember fondly is the scene with Cliff Curtis. We had a scene on a rock in the desert at night, and it's when Clavius gets to talk to Jesus, something maybe many of us would love to do. And our kind of way in, if you like, as actors was to really stay away, at least from my side, to stay away. I didn't have any eye contact or verbal contact with Cliff or the disciples, really, but mostly Cliff. I wanted to preserve some form of energy and tension for the scenes that really mattered. So we filmed for a few months, and it wasn't until that moment on the rock that was the first time I had eye contact and kind of said hello through my character. That was the first time we met each other.
There's also a great line on that rock where, you tell him that you can't believe what you saw, and he says, well, if you can't believe what you saw, imagine everybody else in the world who's never going to get to see this, but is going to have to believe, which is a pretty an interesting perspective on faith and on that story.
I think it is. I think it's all about, if you have a faith, whether it's New Testament or your own inner philosophy and faith, it comes in and out of focus. But I feel that I love that concept that even if you get to witness it firsthand, there's always this intellectual voice that says, nah, can it be? Maybe it's a trick, or maybe, this is what Clavius is thinking. Maybe Yeshua has a twin brother and he tricked me. It's very difficult to shut down that noise of the ego, and I think, whatever your beliefs, sometimes it's kind of cool to be able to shut that down and then tune into the greater consciousness.
And also the fact that they are beliefs, that they are, and a lot of times, faith is not fact, it is belief. It is believing in that.
It's confidence and a belief in something greater, yeah.
Absolutely. Next question.
Hey, I got something from my question box. He handled the movie with so much substance and something that's as serious as this. I was wondering what you took away from the experience.
Great question. I took away a couple of things. One, I'm going to be cheeky and tell you I took away how difficult it is to wear sandals for a long period of time. And my question to you all is, how did the Roman army take over great swathes of the world in sandals? But I'll go back to the more serious point.
They must have the most cut up, disgusting feet.
Really, no toenails. And I tell you, yeah, I can vouch for that, yeah. But we digress. Getting back, I feel, for me, it's just a simple sense of reconnecting with the conversation of what faith means to me. I think that's what I took away from the whole journey.
Next question.
Hi, I'm sorry. Hi, Mr. Fiennes.
Hi.
I saw a short film that you directed in 2007 called The Spirit. I thought it was pretty amazing. Great.
You're the
14
only
minutes.
one.
Okay.
No.
It was
I
really-
mean that in a great way. Come up here, let me give you a hug.
I will hug you. I was actually going to ask, you're such a phenomenal actor, if we're going to see anything from you on the other side of the camera anytime soon.
I've been striving for a number of years to get one pet project off the road and up and running. It is a story set in Philadelphia, modern Philadelphia, that surrounds a group of gentlemen who have stables and horses, and through the power of the horse get young men off the street in areas that maybe they shouldn't be, and reconnect with all that's beautiful in their voice and their potential through the power of the horse. And it's called Street Riders. It's an article I read in Life magazine, and I was so taken by it. I wanted to get that made, but I struggled to get finance. Another film that I've been asked to direct recently, because a producer saw the film you're talking about, so there's two of you now, is a film called Flush, and it's a biography of a dog, but written by Virginia Woolf, a great literary genius, and it's really using that device of looking at the life of a dog, but that dog gets to see another character, and that character is Elizabeth Barrett Browning, who is a wonderful poet and writer, up there sort of with Austen and the Brontes. So that's what I'm working on now.
Wow, can you talk a little bit about just how difficult it is to get a film up and running?
I've mainly done independent movies, and I have such respect for anybody that I work with as an actor, in terms of being with a director and the whole team, producers. It takes years and years of absolute sweat and toil and struggle and finance to get things together. So I'm really, whenever I see a movie, even if it doesn't speak to me, I will always reserve a part of myself to say congratulations for getting it up there, because it's a crapshoot. It's so difficult. So huge power to those to even do it, and even amazing if it gets well received and then gets distribution.
Does that make you even more sort of empathetic with your directors on set sometimes as well? Like if they're having a really hard day and the sun is going down and like maybe they're not communicating their vision to you as perfectly and maybe you're getting frustrated, you can kind of always go back on, well, there's a lot more stuff that they're dealing with, and it's pretty hard for them as well right now.
It's true. When I started out, I was less aware, and it didn't take me long to become hugely aware. So yes, I'm completely aware of all the components that they're juggling, and you're reminded continually. It's funny how actors go, yeah, I made this movie, and you want to go, whoa, you didn't make a movie, you were in it. You had nothing to do with making it.
You showed up for 5 days.
You showed up when someone gave you a cappuccino in the morning, and but so I'm hugely aware the components involved. So yeah, I'm always on side for the director, as long as they don't shout.
I think we have time for one more question right here.
Hello.
Hi.
So my question is, having a theme about faith and religion, for your role, was there a certain research method that you did to prepare yourself for this role?
In terms of faith and religion, no. I read up about Roman gods and picked really and concentrated on which God my character would pray to, and sort of really concentrated on that. Less of a spiritual angle, more on a physical training, what it is to be a Roman, a soldier. I also met with a detective because there's a series of interrogations, and I have children, and when they're naughty, I'm terrible at interrogating them about what went on, and so I thought, well, I have to see a professional about this. So it was really that angle, less a kind of spiritual one. I wanted to build him up in one particular form of conditioning in order for the confrontation or the kind of interaction with others and their spirituality to kind of dissolve his conditioning. So that was more my approach.
Well, Joseph, Risen comes out this Friday, right? In 4,000 screens across the country?
Almost 3,000.
Oh, 3,000 screens across the country.
Yeah, 3,000, but yeah, it's a big opening. Yeah, this Friday.
Well, guys, go see it. It's a great movie. Joseph, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good.